Well, hi there, and welcome back to Her Shrink Ray Eye. I'm Joan Biediger, and tonight I want to talk about why creativity for some of us gets stronger after the sun goes down. What is it that happens to our creativity after midnight when the world outside us is sleeping and our minds start to wander in a different way? I don't mean staying up late or working until the first light of dawn. I'm talking about that short period of time when the day finally lets go and our inner world expands. This is when the world is silent and focus gets softer, yet somehow deeper. That shift, that quiet change in how the mind works, is what I want to explore. My writing tends to inhabit daylight, but painting or building at night feels entirely different. I never quite knew why until I began reading some of the research behind it. And of course, we'll talk about how all that connects to miniature work, because something about the scale, ingenuity, and creativity of what we make feels perfect for the quiet hours of the night. My goal isn't to convince anyone to stay up late. It's to understand why creativity for some of us feels different after midnight, and why miniature art feels so at home in that window of time. Time acts differently after midnight, or at least it seems that way to me. Most of my painting and building happens at night, either before midnight or after. I find it difficult to get into that same mindset as I do during the day. But at night, there's a unique atmosphere that's often really hard to put into words. You might plan to correct one small detail, and then suddenly 2 hours have passed. Or the opposite, 15 minutes feels like an hour. Psychologists note that how long time feels to us depends on the signals we get from the world around us. During the day, there's a constant stream of reminders: email, chores, sunlight, traffic. The world around us helps regulate our sense of time. At night, those signals often quiet down. The external markers fade, and we start using internal ones: our thoughts, emotions, and the sensation of stillness. The clock keeps ticking, but the brain stops checking it so often. Time stops feeling like a line and starts feeling like a pool you can drift in. Neuroscientists have proposed the mind after midnight hypothesis. In a 2022 review, Andrew S. Tubbs and his colleagues argue that during nocturnal wakefulness, the balance of attention, affect, reward processing, and executive control can shift. That tilt may help explain why some late-night choices are bolder and why creative leaps sometimes arrive when the world is asleep. Other research on the default mode network, the system active during quiet wakefulness and daydreaming, shows it's more engaged when external demands are low, a state that supports internal association making. Miniature work fits this perfectly. It already lives outside normal scale and time. When your sense of time relaxes, the miniature world and your internal one align. Its stillness matches yours. Darkness does more than change the way a room appears to your eye. It changes how your mind processes what it sees. In low light, your eyes shift from using cones, which handle color and fine detail to rods, which sense motion, shape, and contrast. Rods carry low light or scotopic vision, while cones support color and fine detail in brighter conditions. As that happens, edges soften and colors lose brightness. Texture sometimes turns into more of a suggestion. What you see is not less real, it's simply less defined. Your brain quietly fills in the missing information from experience and memory. It draws on the places you've visited, the people you've met, the emotions you've experienced. It's a subtle process of inference where imagination and perception overlap. As the body shifts toward biological night, melatonin rises, signaling the body to wind down. Alertness eases and attention turns inward. In that softer focus, we notice connections the daytime rush can bury. A scene that felt complete in daylight may surprise you at night. A faint glow from a window, a shadow that suddenly carries emotion. The brain is doing what it was built to do, interpreting partial light through inference and memory. Miniatures thrive on that same language of implication. The shadow under a chair, the trace of movement through a doorway, the feeling that someone just left the scene. At night, imagination and perception overlap. You're not just painting or arranging. It feels like you're collaborating with perception itself. Artists have been collaborating with darkness for centuries. Caravaggio and Rembrandt used lamplight to pull emotion from shadow, while Whistler's nocturnes turned night itself into subject matter. Dimness has always invited interpretation. It leaves just enough unsaid for imagination to step in. In that same way, when we build or paint under a single light, we're joining that lineage of makers who let the dark do half the storytelling. Not everyone's mind is wired for the same hours. Sleep researchers call this your chronotype, or your natural tendency toward early mornings, late nights, or the hours in between. Most adults fall in the middle. Many people reach their peak creatively late at night, while others are at their best early in the morning. This isn't about discipline, it's about biology, like genetics, hormones, and even age. Some studies link something called eveningness with higher originality or remote associations, while others find morning types show advantages in fluency on certain tasks. In practice, the best hour is personal. Match your work to your rhythm. What matters isn't when you work, it's what happens when the world stops demanding your attention. The qualities of the small hours that facilitate creativity, silence, slower pacing, lower stimulation, can exist anytime if you intentionally establish them. There's something distinctive about late hours, just as there is in early ones. Each has its own rhythm of thought. People who naturally stay up later often describe a mental release. They feel less self-critical, less filtered, more open to ideas that might seem strange in daylight hours. Studies on chronotypes suggest evening-type people tend to do better on tasks that reward flexible or unconventional associations, while morning types lean into early day clarity. It's not absolute. It's just one of those individual rhythms that shape how we work best. Creativity isn't exclusive to the darkness. However, darkness eliminates some of the constraints that daylight imposes. Daylight often requires order and efficiency from us. Night invites curiosity. Miniature work fits right into that shift. It's patient and intimate, not rushed or public. Whether you're naturally nocturnal or not, the goal is the same: finding that pocket of quiet where you stop editing every thought and simply let the act of making lead you somewhere unexpected. During the day, your bench is part of the busy world, bright, factual, maybe a little judgmental. Daylight can reveal the seams and flaws of your miniature, but under the warm glow of a single lamp at night, the entire environment transforms. The rest of the room fades into darkness, and the circle of light surrounding your workbench forms its own mini stage. Some people describe solitude as creating a mental room within a room, a temporary area of concentration and focus. That pool of light changes the work and the worker. Psychologists describe boundary thinness, an openness between inner thought and outer perception, which is linked to imagination and empathy. Night doesn't cause it, but the quiet and the low light make it easier to feel. When I'm at my bench at 1 a.m, I can feel that difference. The house is quiet and my thoughts seem to spill more easily into what I'm building. That line between imagination and perception seems to soften. Shapes and shadows begin to carry meaning, and the miniature in front of me feels less like just a small object. Science might not measure that kind of shift, but some artists know it instinctively. The way the quiet of night lets the inner and outer worlds lean closer together for a while. There's a plausible evolutionary echo here. In darkness, a single flame signaled warmth and company. The comfort we feel under a desk lamp may borrow a little of that. As you sit there, the light doesn't just let you see your miniature. It lets you notice yourself seeing it. It reduces the world to that circle of light, and your thoughts settle into the rhythm of your hands. The bench becomes both a stage and a sanctuary. We live in a culture that runs on transactional time. Every hour is filled with deadlines, appointments, and expectations. I'll finish this so I can start that. Once this is posted, then I can rest. There's always a clock ticking somewhere and some kind of audience watching, whether it's the outside world or that inner critic we all know so well. But at 1:30 in the morning, when all of that finally quiets down, the performance ends. You're no longer curating yourself for anyone. You're just there, thinking and feeling, letting yourself slow down and breathe again. Historian Roger Eckert documented segmented sleep in pre-industrial times. First and second sleep, separated by a wakeful interval used for prayer, mending, or reflection. It wasn't idleness, it was contemplation. Neuroscience echoes that. During the transition towards sleep and across sleep stages, emotional and memory centers, the amygdala and the hippocampus, interact to consolidate experience. That may be why late evening reflection can sometimes feel more emotionally vivid. We no longer tend embers, but we tend imagination. There's another part of this conversation to consider: the difference between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness is the condition of being isolated but longing for connection. Solitude is choosing aloneness because it restores you. Psychologists describe solitude as non-aversive aloneness, meaning time spent alone that feels comfortable rather than distressing. It's a kind of quiet that restores instead of drains you. The psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott even called the ability to be alone a sign of emotional maturity. Creativity depends on that. When you can be comfortable in your own company, the mind has space to play without judgment. In solitude, the brain's default mode network, the same one linked to daydreaming and reflection, lights up. A lot of miniature work thrives in solitude when you're steady and completely engaged, driven by intuition rather than judgment. The angle of a figure, the warmth of a color, the play of shadow, each expands your ability to listen to yourself, a skill that can be rare in a loud world. Working in quiet hours, night or day, places you in a long lineage of people who've found their deepest creative moments in dark and quietness. Not because night is magical, but it offers the one condition most creative work needs: quiet. Beethoven composed sketch after sketch at night after his long evening walks. He believed the solitude of darkness helped him hear internal music more clearly. Marie Curie worked far into the night in her Paris laboratory because it was the only time she could concentrate without interruption. And Frida Kahlo, often awake due to pain, painted through the night to transform it into something living. Even Thomas Edison, who famously shortened his sleep cycles, credited the night as his silent collaborator. When the outer world falls silent, the inner world can expand. Researchers who study creativity report that late hours often decrease what they call cognitive inhibition, the mental gatekeeper that filters our ideas. When those gates loosen, we form connections across broader emotional and semantic associations, which can enhance creativity in some cases. Writers like Proust and Kafka describe night as a second consciousness. Romantic artists like Caspar David Friedrich painted night as a moment of revelation rather than darkness. And surrealist artists such as Salvador Dali and poets like Rainer Maria Rilke believed that the late hours provided a doorway to intuition that daylight closed. Modern research aligns with parts of what those artists sensed. Reduced stimulation and mild fatigue can loosen cognitive filters and widen associations. It's not about producing more, it's about allowing the mind to relax its control so ideas can surface. When you sit down at your bench at 1 a.m, you're not copying their rituals, you're simply sharing their conditions: solitude, dim light, and a relaxed pace that lets deeper thoughts expand. There's a scientific explanation for why thoughts sometimes feel more substantial and meaningful after midnight. As you drift towards sleep, the mind trades precision for connection. You stop editing every idea and start noticing how one image hints at another. In that state, creativity feels less like invention and more like discovery. Neuroscientists who study sleep, like Robert Stickgold and Matthew Walker, have found that as the brain prepares for rest, it starts to connect distant pieces of information. The hippocampus and the neocortex begin exchanging data, shaping fragments of experience into loose associations. It's not storytelling yet, but it's the groundwork for it. The mind quietly sorting, linking, and testing meaning. That's one reason artists and thinkers throughout history have used the late hours to their advantage. In that softer mental state, ideas don't need to prove themselves. They just appear. Salvador Dali tried to capture this by holding a key as he dozed, waking himself the instant he began to slip into dream. Thomas Edison did something very similar with steel balls. Both of them were chasing that thin line between waking order and drifting imagination. That's why a miniature you hold in those hours can hold emotional weight you didn't plan. The work becomes a type of mirror. You might paint a dim alleyway that recalls a memory, or construct a room that feels like someone you love. Scientists think that during these late hours, the brain begins to revisit and reorganize the day's experiences, allowing loose associations to surface. To us, that can feel like creativity taking shape. Walk into your workspace at 2 in the afternoon and it behaves like a workspace. Walk in at 2 in the morning and it behaves like a sanctuary. By night, the same lamp becomes less a light source and more a kind of companion. It defines the space where work and calm meet. The silence becomes part of the composition. Psychologists Stephen and Rachel Kaplan, in their attention restoration theory, describe soft fascination, gentle, effortless attention that lets the mind recover. It's the same state you enter when watching a fire or the movement of waves on a lake. Miniature work at night often produces this same harmony. Your hands move smoothly and deliberately. Your thoughts drift and return. Your attention alternates between observing and imagining. There's a psychological basis for the tranquility you experience. As melatonin rises, the body begins to wind down. Heart rate and alertness drop, and attention turns inward. Prolactin typically rises overnight as part of normal sleep physiology, a sign the body is shifting toward restoration. That shift often feels calm and reflective. It's not that the brain suddenly becomes more creative at night. It's that the systems that keep you alert and task-driven finally loosen their hold. When that happens, small moments of progress, a smooth brushstroke, a color that finally works, can register more fully. You notice them because the noise has fallen away. You're not imagining the piece, your physiology supports it. The body is shifting towards rest, and your mind moves with it. The bench becomes more than a workspace. It's a reflection of that internal balance. When you turn off the lamp, the circle of light lingers in your mind. It's a reminder that calm doesn't mean stopping. It means finding the rhythm that lets you think and create at your own natural pace. Miniatures seem to have their own sense of time. They capture moments and by doing so invite you to enter into scenes which remain motionless, yet seem to breathe. And it's precisely this stillness that adds to the miniature's ability to evoke a response. Philosophers sometimes call this lived time, time as we experience it rather than as we measure it. It's the time of memory, emotion, and attention. That same patience carries into miniature work, where a single moment can hold the weight of time. In those hours, time feels less like something to measure and more like something you inhabit. At the bench, your rhythm slows to match the miniatures, a world not fixed to the clock on the wall. Some psychologists use thin boundaries to describe people who experience a more fluid exchange between inner thought and outer perception, which is a trait often seen alongside creative sensitivity. Night doesn't create this, but the quiet can make it easier to notice. When you return to the peace and daylight, you can usually see that quiet imprint of night left behind, a trace of your own stillness caught in its details. None of this is a call to sacrifice sleep. The body needs real rest. Once fatigue sets in, focus and good judgment may start to slip, no matter how inspired you feel. But there are aspects of the creativity that can occur in the late night hours that are worth carrying forward into daily life. At night, your standards for evaluation often lessen and your curiosity expands. You stop asking whether something is good or efficient. Instead, you focus on making. That openness is what the late hours teach best. How to work without an audience. How to follow intuition. How to give yourself time that isn't tied to outcome. Researchers studying divergent thinking have found something interesting. Mild fatigue, not full exhaustion, just the edge of tiredness, can sometimes increase creative associations. As the brain's filters relax, ideas that would normally never meet can connect. Midnight isn't necessary for that. A bit of quiet often works. I don't think we need silence either. Sometimes music or background sound helps create that atmosphere. You can build small versions of this during the day. Dim the light, silence your phone, put a familiar tool within reach. The goal isn't to replicate the conditions of night, but to create a similar mental space, slower pacing, private time, and a gentler attitude towards your own creative process. When you slow down your pace, you will likely discover that your sense of proportion has returned in both your work and in yourself. What appeared to be complex has been reduced to manageable levels. What was previously perceived as critical has begun to lose some of its importance. Creativity thrives in that slower kind of attention. At night, attention turns inward. When everything else is quiet, you begin to sense the shape of your own inner space, the memories, emotions, and thoughts that usually stay buried under the noise of the day. Miniatures often reveal traces of what's happening beneath the surface, maybe not intentionally, but because the work quietly absorbs the state of mind that built it. A stairwell can take on the weight of a decision. An attic might echo a memory. A closed door can suggest something we're not ready to open. Those details don't come from planning. They just show up quietly while your hands are busy and your mind starts to wander. At night, that rhythm slows enough for meaning to rise. You're not forcing introspection. You're simply quiet enough to notice it. The work becomes an extension of memory and emotion, a small map of your own state of mind. When daylight returns and you see the piece again, it holds a stillness you can recognize. There's something of you in it, not dramatic, just the calm and care that built it. That's what the night gives back, a way to meet yourself without words. So if you find yourself awake in those hours, calm, curious, and half dreaming, don't rush to turn the light off. The world can wait. Turn on the lamp, sit at the bench. Let your hands move at the pace of the dark, not the pace of the day. You don't need to create a masterpiece. Just make something honest. Let the miniature hold what the day didn't have room for. And when morning comes and you look at that small world in daylight again, you might find it's holding something simple and quiet, a truth only night could help you see. Thanks for spending this time with me in whatever light you're in now. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a fellow hobbyist or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'll be right here with my lamp on, brush in hand, story waiting. Until next time, keep your hands steady, see clearly, not obediently, and keep your story your own. Thanks for listening.